All right, thanks very much. A pleasure to be here. First time presenting at a Benzinga event, and really appreciate the inclusion. As a public company, I will be making some forward statements. You can learn more about our risk factors through our filings. So Lineage Cell Therapeutics, really, what are we looking to do here? Nothing less than ushering in a new branch of medicine. The aim of the company, our sole purpose here, is to manufacture and transplant specific cell types and then deliver those to the body. I'm going to show you a few examples. You've probably heard a lot about different approaches in cell therapy. You've probably heard a lot of wondrous things about cell therapy. I want to be very clear that Lineage does something very different. We never put a stem cell into a human being. What we do is we use stem cells as starting material. That starting material is that the cells can become any of the cell types in your body. So your body is comprised of 200 or more different cell types. We can manufacture different cell types and then use those cells to replace what's missing. So we are transplanting whole cells to the body. This is very different than using undifferentiated stem cells, which have a lot of questions about whether they really work, and people are going to clinics and getting things, injected into them all over in different places and spending a lot of money. But there haven't been a lot of randomized and controlled clinical trials that have passed through the FDA process to demonstrate whether or not you're actually getting any sort of benefit. So that is our mission, to manufacture specific cell types, deliver them to the body in order to drive positive clinical outcomes. Why are we so passionate about that? And the answer is that using whole cells may be able to generate outcomes that are beyond the reach of traditional small molecules or antibodies and traditional pharmaceuticals that you think about. And we've seen some evidence of that. For example, in a condition which is only directionally gets worse, we've been able to show a reversal, a rescue of some tissue. I'll describe that in a minute. In spinal cord injury patients, which for decades have really had nothing, we've been able to show that we are able to prevent the cavitation or the hole that forms after a spinal cord injury. So we have 3 clinical programs today. We recently updated our cash position as of March 5th, had 57 million in cash equivalents, and the company's market capitalization has been growing substantially over the recent period. So this is a schematic or an illustration of our technology. We use those cells up there at the top right-hand corner of the image, and again, you can, in theory, manufacture any of the 200 different cell types. We focus down at the bottom on those 3. We can manufacture specific retina cells, spinal cord cells, and a certain type of immune cell to treat various diseases and conditions. Each of our clinical stage programs has received validating and meaningful levels of funding, upwards of $40 million in the aggregate from groups like the California Stem Cell Agency and others. And we have some notable clinical milestones later this year. In fact, we just reported yesterday an update with our lead program, Oprogen. That's where we transplant retina cells to treat one of the leading causes of vision loss. That vision loss is called AMD, or dry age-related macular degeneration. It's caused by essentially a wound in the back of the eye, and the wound gets bigger and bigger. So this is a panel of images of a patient's eye in the back of their eye, and you can see that black spot is getting bigger. And the red line is showing actual data from their vision, going from 20/20 down to being essentially completely blind as that wound grows. It's a lesion that's getting worse and worse over time. So what we do is we manufacture the new cells to replace the ones that are dying off and causing that lesion. We do this in part because there are no approved therapies for this condition. There are 2 forms of this condition. They're called wet and dry. There are therapies for wet AMD, and they're doing about $10 billion in sales. But many more people have the dry form of the condition. And again, this is an untapped market, certainly undisputably with many billions of dollars of revenue potential. Now, people have tried, let's not be ridiculous here, people have tried to treat dry AMD, but they've tried with traditional approaches like small molecules. What we're doing is we're manufacturing those cells and transplanting them. And we've had a lot of success. We've transplanted successfully 24 individuals. So compared to others, especially some academics that are working in this, we are way beyond where others are with respect to our clinical experience. This is a one-time treatment so far. The first 12 patients, they were all legally blind. That's a safety consideration. We're treating people who have very bad, very advanced disease, and we do that because we don't want to do any harm. After we gained some confidence and we saw some encouraging initial results, we moved into patients that more accurately reflect our intended patient population. That is to say, people that have got less advanced disease. And for us, these are individuals who hold out greater hope of being able to treat their condition. And we finished enrollment in November. Now this graph, I'm going to spend a minute on this because this is breaking data. We just recently, just yesterday, we announced an update. So a prior version of this graph had maybe half as many patients, and we've updated it. And what's really notable, the takeaway here, is that the treated eye, because everyone has two eyes almost, the treated eye is able to read more letters than the untreated eye. This is impressive because what we were happy about is that in the first 6 patients, we had seen that at 4.5 months, about 5 out of those 6 patients were either at or above baseline. And again, this is a progressive condition. It only gets worse. So we were very happy that 5 of 6 patients at 4.5 months had gotten better. Well, we recently announced additional data, which another 4 out of 6 patients were again at or above baseline, meaning 75% of our patients were at or above baseline at 4.5 months. That's notable because with small numbers, you always run the risk that it might be just luck. You got a few patients going the right way, but we essentially doubled our data set. Things were affirmed through 4.5 months, and I can tell you that those patients, those original 6 that we treated, call it pre-COVID, those patients maintained gains. They continued to be at or above baseline at their longest measured time point, whether it's 9 or 15, 18 or 24 months. So the ones that went up stayed up. So we're really happy to have announced that we saw another 4 patients that had an early indication of a trajectory of being positive. And we think as this data set grows, it's going to be very encouraging for us, and that we'll continue to monitor these patients. I do want to add that the other thing that we look at is the size of the lesion, but that takes a lot of months to follow. It's a slow growing effect. So this is vision. This is looking at letters on an eye chart. Visual, the size of the area of atrophy takes longer to monitor. So there's not really anything notable to see in the first few months. But next quarter, we intend to provide another update. And so you'll be able to see patients out to 6 months and follow up again. How are they trending? What's the trajectory look like? This is an example of, is just to give you a reference point, how many letters of improvement. Here's a 10 or 15 letter improvement. Obviously, it'll really help you pass your driver's license exam or read your phone and just have a better quality of life for people who are headed toward blindness. The other thing that we've done, and no one else has shown this, is we've been able to demonstrate something called retinal regeneration. So this is that wound that I said, it only gets worse. Well, we actually made one of these get better. So this is a tracing. It's an aerial view of the wound. And in orange, that's the size of it in the back of the eye. That's how big it was. We traced it and colored it in so it was easy to see. And then after a year, it had grown from orange to red. And we treated the patient basically when they were at red, when the wound was like that. And then 9 months later, we traced it again and we've colored it in blue, and you can see that it's smaller. And then out at 23 months, which is the last available data, that patient still had a smaller area of atrophy. This does not happen. Human beings do not have the ability to regenerate retinal tissue. So if you had 100 people and you followed their areas of atrophy, 100 of them over time would have a larger area of atrophy. Well, here's someone who after 2 years of monitoring has consistently had a smaller area of atrophy and improved vision over this period as well. This is the promise of cell therapy. This is the promise of cell transplants. This is the promise of Lineage Cell Therapeutics. I really love how we are positioned among the other companies working in this, because many of them are approaching it in a traditional way. Small molecules, antibody, trying to stop inflammation. I think the problem is too big. I think the problem requires transplant medicine. There was an article this morning on Endpoints News, a very widely read industry article talking about the big open secret in cell therapy is manufacturing, and that there are a lot of companies that are working on promising clinical issues but haven't figured out manufacturing. We've figured out manufacturing. We manufacture more than 99% pure retina cells, and in just a 3-liter bioreactor like the one I'm showing right now, we can manufacture 5 billion retina cells. That's equal to 2,500 clinical doses per batch, and it is straightforward to add more bioreactors, larger bioreactors. We grow these cells in 3 dimensions. They're not grown on plates. They're not grown on 2 dimensions. So we can scale in a very straightforward manner. The cells don't know if they're in a little thimble of liquid or a swimming pool of liquid. They all behave the same. So we have exquisite control of our manufacturing, and we can scale up, making it affordable. Unlike a lot of cell therapies that when you start doing the math on whether they're affordable, these customized therapies, autologous therapies, it just doesn't pencil out. So we have invested in manufacturing in order to differentiate ourselves among other companies. I will not go through this for the benefit of time. I would try and get some questions at the end, but we have positioned our lead program to take advantage of the multi-billion-dollar commercial opportunity in dry AMD through regulatory advantages, through product enhancements, through scale and in manufacturing. We've done a lot, and I welcome you to look further into it when you have time. Another area of interest for us, for which we're in the clinic, is spinal cord injury. Again, nothing available. It needs new approaches. So we transplant cells so that we can help people like this young man who was on our clinical trial. He was paralyzed after his car crash. Here you see him throwing out a baseball, but it's more important to me that he can manipulate that knob on his wheelchair, right? That's mobility, that's independence. I'm less interested in, the one day where he throws a baseball. I want to make sure that this kid can feed himself and dress himself and use the toilet when he wants to. So that's about getting upper extremity mobility. How do we get mobility for people who are otherwise paralyzed? And there are about 18,000 new cases of spinal cord injury every year. So what we do is manufacture different kind of cell. We manufacture oligodendrocytes. These are cells that are kind of like, they provide the insulation to the wiring of your nervous system. If you want your fingers to move, they need to receive a signal from your brain. That's carried on axons, and that signal needs insulation in order to be carried appropriately. We provide those cells. This is just some deep data to give you a sense of one of the big problems with spinal cord injury is it can leave a hole behind. This is the top left panel. This is a rodent slice, and after an injury, you have this problem. And you can see on the right, after transplanting our OpRegen cells, you can essentially fill that area. That's important because an electrical current cannot jump across a gap. It needs material to be carried on. And so that's one of the many advantages of using OPC1. These cells come from an NIH-registered cell line. They're just like our other program. They're off the shelf. We've never had problems in our eye program with rejection. We don't have problems with rejection in our spinal cord. We are able to manufacture these cells also by the billions. So this is a ready-to-use formulation we've developed. We also have been working on delivery, new enhanced delivery and enhanced scale. And this has been very well tolerated, as you can see, with 534 reported AEs. It reflects how serious these conditions are, but only one of them, and it was fairly minor if you read the asterisk there, only one of them was even related to our cells. So we have a very encouraging safety profile, and we have shown that in about 80% of the time, we've been able to avoid that cavitation, avoid that hole that forms after an injury. More importantly, we've been able to show in about a third of the patients, they were able to gain 2 or more motor levels. So in spinal cord injury, one of the things that you measure are motor levels, i.e. how much can you move, right? What do you care about if you have a spinal cord injury? Moving and feeling. So we have been able to show that we can improve the locomotion of these individuals, essentially moving people from a C4 injury to a C6 or a C5 to a C7. That's a level of neurological injury in the neck. And look at the differences that you can see moving from a C4 to a C6. It's basically going from around-the-clock care to being able to provide significant care for yourself, just getting a little housework around the house, helping to get yourself around, maybe using the toilet, but you can rest, you can get yourself. That is a big, significant, clinically significant move. So we have an excellent safety profile. We've seen high levels of engraftment. It's been very well tolerated, and we're going to be moving toward a randomized controlled clinical trial with this program next year, and we're hopeful to be the first therapeutic to provide for these patients, using also a new device that we recently announced and showing these levels of improvement. So these are measures of impure cells, cell types that you don't want. The old stuff that another sponsor used is in blue. The Lineage stuff is in orange. You can barely see it there, but that's because it's so pure. So we think that is an important safety component, and it reflects that we have good control of our process. In this image, this is an actual procedure, but a very similar setup you might have seen on Grey's Anatomy, that popular show. They borrowed our device and our storyline to talk about how you might be able to use cell therapy to improve outcomes in patients with spinal cord injuries. This has been a supported program, the first clinical program supported by the California Institute for Regenerative Medicine. We have RMAT designation, orphan designation, and of course, we've got a lot of patent coverage. So this is a compelling opportunity to provide new therapeutic outcomes in spinal cord injury. Lastly, we have an oncology program. This reflects our third clinical stage program, third form of cell. We manufacture the dendritic cell. The dendritic cell is part of your immune system, and it is nature's most powerful antigen-presenting cell. So it delivers information to your immune system. We all have immune systems, but sometimes you need to fire them up. And that's what a vaccine does, right? COVID-19 vaccines, it's about firing up and giving information to your immune system. We can do exactly that. In this case, what we're doing is we're putting tumor information into dendritic cells, and then tens of millions of dendritic cells go into the patient to inform the patient's immune system about what makes a tumor cell a tumor cell. So how do you find and destroy that tumor cell? Your immune system needs that information. So we've seen very high levels of antigenicity specific to antigen, and this also is in the clinic. We have one patient left to enroll on this clinical study.
Brian, about 30 seconds left if you can.
Great, thanks. Perfect, Elliot. This also is a platform. We can go after many different tumor types using this platform. So with a lot of news ahead, also just yesterday, recent news, but thinking forward, the takeaway here for Lineage Cell Therapeutics is that this is a growing company in the leading field of regenerative medicine and cell therapy. We control our own manufacturing. We have many hundreds of patents to protect our programs. The company is well funded into 2023 and one of the growing leaders in regenerative medicine and cell therapy. So with that, Elliot, I thank you very much.